After 60. 4. Hidden intimacy fantasies women have but never share with you. Female psychology. A woman can love you deeply and still carry fantasies in her mind that she will never speak out loud. Not because she's betraying you, not because she doesn't desire you anymore, but because after 60, the female mind operates differently than ours. It weaves together emotions, hormones, memories, curiosity, and the need for release in ways that have nothing to do with actual intention. Many older men assume that if a woman has a fantasy, it means she wants to act on it. That's not true. A fantasy is imagination, not a plan. Hi, welcome back to my channel. It's Vernon again. In today's video, I'm going to walk you through 4 hidden female fantasies that women carry but rarely share with men, especially after 60. More importantly, I'll explain what these fantasies reveal about her deeper emotional world, whether they're signs of real dissatisfaction or simply the natural play of imagination. By the end, you'll understand these intimacy truths in a way that strengthens connection instead of creating distance. Before we go further, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I share insights about love, dating, marriage, and understanding women after 60 because our generation deserves relationships built on wisdom, not misunderstanding. Let's start with the first one, a fantasy most men never expect, yet almost every woman has experienced at least once in her life. Shown intimacy with a stranger. Some women after 60 carry a quiet fantasy of sharing intimacy with a man they've never met. What she's longing for isn't another partner, it's freedom. Freedom from the version of herself she's been required to uphold. Freedom from history, responsibility, and the weight of being the strong one. Think about what happens in a long-term relationship after 60. Your partner becomes wife, mother, grandmother, caretaker, friend, household manager. She carries the expectations of everyone around her. Every interaction comes with history, with patterns, with roles she's supposed to fulfill. The fantasy of a stranger represents liberation from all of that. In her imagination, she's not the woman who forgot to pick up your prescription or who's worried about the grandchildren's college funds. She's simply herself, raw and unfiltered, with no performance anxiety, no accumulated resentments, no patterns to maintain. This fantasy typically intensifies when a woman feels her life has become monotonous or when stress levels peak. It's not that you failed her. It's that her brain is seeking novelty as a form of psychological relief. The female mind craves newness, not because the familiar is worthless, but because dopamine responses in the brain require variation. When everything in life becomes predictable, the imagination creates scenarios that feel electric simply because they're different. Understanding women's fantasies means recognizing when this signals genuine dissatisfaction versus when it's simply mental wandering. If your partner seems emotionally distant, if intimacy has become mechanical, if she seems to be going through motions without presence, then her fantasy life might be compensating for real deficits in your connection. But if your relationship maintains emotional closeness, if she initiates affection, if she shares her daily experiences with genuine interest in yours, then her fantasies are likely just her mind's way of creating internal variety, while her heart remains anchored to you. The mature response isn't jealousy or insecurity. It's creating more novelty within your actual relationship. Surprise her with spontaneous plans. Change the setting of your intimacy. Break your own patterns. Show her that the relationship itself can provide the freshness her mind craves without needing to imagine someone else. When you understand that her fantasy reflects a desire for renewal rather than replacement, you stop being threatened and start being creative. It's why Khalil Gibran said, "The mind travels not to abandon home, but to return with renewed appreciation for what home provides." Have you ever noticed your partner seeming distant even when she's physically present? Share in the comments what you've learned about keeping connection alive after years together. Your experience might help another man understand his partner better. But sometimes a woman doesn't just want freedom from expectations. She wants temporary escape from the exhausting burden of always being in control. #2 Power Dynamics. There's a fantasy that lives in the minds of countless women, and it has to do with power, giving it up or taking it back. Men often misunderstand this. They wonder why a strong woman might dream of being guided, or why a soft woman might envision herself as the one in command. The truth is simple. Fantasy lets her step outside the role the world assigned her. Power dynamics fantasies aren't about actual violence or disrespect. They're about the psychological relief of temporarily stepping out of your default role. A woman who manages households, careers, and family members all day long carries enormous responsibility. Her mind never stops planning, organizing, preventing problems, and taking care of others. The fantasy of being dominated offers her brain a vacation from all that control. In her imagination, someone else makes all the decisions. She surrenders responsibility completely. She gets to be soft, vulnerable, taken care of, without any guilt, because the choice has been removed from her hands. Conversely, women who spend their lives accommodating others, saying yes when they want to say no, and prioritizing everyone else's needs, might fantasize about being completely in charge. In those scenarios, their desires become the only priority. They experience the emotional satisfaction of being served, pursued, and pleased without having to consider anyone else's comfort. It's not cruelty they're imagining. It's the simple experience of mattering most. My former wife once explained this to me during a conversation that changed how I understood women's emotional desires. She said that during intimacy, she sometimes wanted me to be so decisive and commanding that she didn't have to think about anything except feeling. Other times, she wanted to orchestrate everything, to have me respond completely to her direction. Neither fantasy meant she wanted our actual relationship dynamic to change. She loved our partnership, but in those private moments, her brain craved the release of playing a different role. What this taught me is that fantasy conversation guides in healthy relationships acknowledge these psychological needs without judgment. The key question isn't whether your partner has power dynamics fantasies, but whether your actual intimacy allows her to feel safe enough to occasionally step outside her everyday role. Can she be vulnerable with you without worrying you'll see her as weak? Can she express desires without worrying you'll think she's demanding? The fantasy signals that she craves these emotional experiences. Whether that need gets met in reality or remains in imagination depends on the emotional safety you create together. As Esther Perel incisively observes about the human psyche, we contain multitudes, and the self that emerges in desire is often the self we're least permitted to express in daylight. For many women over 60, power dynamics fantasies intensify because they've spent decades being responsible. They've raised children, managed households, perhaps cared for aging parents. Their minds are exhausted from decision-making. The fantasy offers what reality rarely does: complete respite from the burden of control, or alternatively, a space where their control is absolute and unchallengeable. When you notice patterns in your partner's behavior, when she seems to crave either more leadership from you or more acknowledgement of her desires, recognize these as possible echoes of her fantasy life seeking expression. The gift you can give her isn't necessarily enacting the fantasy, but creating relationship closeness where she feels safe, expressing the underlying emotional need. But for many women after 60, it's not about power roles or freedom from identity. Wanted. #3 Group encounters. Women sometimes fantasize about multi-partner scenarios, and it shakes men deeply. But this fantasy isn't literal, it's symbolic. It reflects her longing to feel chosen, pursued, and overwhelmed with affection. It's the intensity she's seeking, not the participants. Women's desire psychology operates differently than men's. For most women, arousal connects deeply to feeling wanted, pursued, and valued. In her everyday life after 60, she might feel invisible. Society has conditioned us to see older women as less desirable, less relevant, less worthy of attention. Even in loving relationships, the intensity of pursuit often fades after decades together. You know you love her, but do you show her that she's still the most attractive woman in the room to you? Does she feel your desire radiating toward her the way she did in your early years together? The fantasy of multiple partners creates an imaginary scenario where her desirability is so overwhelming that multiple people want her simultaneously. It's not the physical act she's craving. It's the dopamine surge that comes from feeling irresistibly attractive. It's the psychological experience of being the center of complete attention and desire. In her fantasy, she's not invisible. She's magnetic. This fantasy often emerges when a woman feels overlooked in her actual life. Maybe you've stopped complimenting her appearance. Maybe intimacy has become routine and efficient rather than passionate and exploratory. Maybe you look at your phone more than you look at her during conversations. Her mind creates scenarios where she's undeniably the focus because that emotional experience is missing from her reality. My sister Eleanor, who's 66, once shared with me a story about her friend Margaret. Margaret had been married for 40 years to a good man who loved her but had stopped actively desiring her. He was affectionate but predictable. Their intimacy happened on schedule. Same time, same approach. Margaret started having elaborate fantasies about scenarios with multiple partners. She felt guilty about these thoughts until she realized they weren't really about wanting other people. They were about desperately wanting to feel the electricity of being wanted again. Before I continue, if this video is helping you understand feminine attraction triggers in a new way, do me a favor and share it with another man who's trying to build a deeper relationship with his partner. Understanding creates connection, and we all benefit when more men approach women's psychology with curiosity rather than judgment. What resolved Margaret's fantasy obsession wasn't suppressing her thoughts. It was her husband accidentally discovering what she truly needed. He started pursuing her again, not just for sex, but for her company, her thoughts, her presence. He looked at her with desire again. He made her feel seen. Once that happened, her fantasies quieted because the underlying emotional hunger was being fed in reality. Alain de Botton suggests a compassionate interpretation of our desires. We fantasize about abundance, not because we're ungrateful, but because we're starving for the feeling of being truly nourished. If your partner seems withdrawn, or if you sense distance in your intimacy, ask yourself honestly when you last made her feel genuinely desired, not loved in the comfortable way of long partnership, but desired with the intensity of attraction. Women's hidden longing often expresses itself in fantasy, when reality stops providing the emotional fuel she needs. The message here isn't to feel inadequate. It's to recognize that after 60, maintaining desire requires intentionality. You have to actively choose to see your partner with fresh eyes, to express attraction, to pursue her emotionally. When you do that consistently, her need for fantasy diminishes because you're giving her the emotional experience her fantasies were trying to create. And sometimes, it's not even about people at all. Sometimes the fantasy is about the setting, about the thrill of where something might happen rather than what happens. For public or semi-public settings. Why does the idea of being seen awaken a different part of a woman's emotional world than anything that happens behind closed doors? This hidden fantasy involves intimacy in public or semi-public places where there's a risk of being discovered. About 40% of women picture scenes in elevators, parked cars, quiet corners of restaurants, or secluded outdoor spaces. Men often assume this fantasy is about danger or rebellion. It isn't. It reflects something far more internal. What drives this particular fantasy is the neurochemical cocktail of adrenaline combined with desire. When the brain perceives mild risk or transgression, it releases adrenaline and dopamine simultaneously. This combination creates an intensity of feeling that routine intimacy in familiar settings simply cannot match. The fantasy isn't about the public setting itself. It's about breaking monotony, about feeling alive and spontaneous, about recapturing the excitement that existed before your relationship became predictable. This fantasy typically intensifies when a woman's life feels excessively controlled and scheduled. Think about the reality most women over 60 face. Their days follow predictable patterns. They know exactly what each day will bring. Even their intimate life often happens on a schedule. In the same bedroom, in similar ways, the human brain craves novelty, especially the female brain, which processes emotional experience alongside physical sensation. When everything becomes routine, the mind rebels by creating scenarios that feel dangerous, unpredictable, and therefore exciting. Understanding women's fantasy patterns means recognizing that the public setting fantasy is really about wanting to feel like intimacy can happen spontaneously, driven by overwhelming desire, rather than scheduled convenience. She's not imagining being caught. She's imagining being so desired that location becomes irrelevant, that you can't wait. That passion overrides propriety. That emotional experience is what she's actually craving. The appearance of this fantasy often correlates with stress levels. When a woman feels overwhelmed by responsibilities, her brain seeks escape through scenarios that represent complete abandon. The fantasy of intimacy in a risky location offers psychological permission to stop being responsible, careful, and controlled for a few minutes. It's her mind's way of experiencing the feeling of being fully present in her body, rather than trapped in her endless mental to-do list. Now here's the critical distinction you need to make. Is this fantasy a playful mental escape, or is it signaling genuine dissatisfaction? If your relationship maintains emotional closeness, spontaneous affection, and varied intimacy, then her fantasies are likely just her imagination playing. But if your intimate life has become completely predictable, if she seems disconnected during intimacy, if spontaneity has disappeared entirely from your relationship, then her fantasies might be showing you what's missing. The mature relationship response isn't to suggest actually having intimacy in risky public places. Most women don't truly want that. What they want is the feeling those scenarios represent: spontaneity, intensity, passion that can't be contained. You can provide that emotional experience in safe, private settings by introducing unpredictability. Surprise her. Change locations within your home. Initiate intimacy at unexpected times. Show her that desire for her can be spontaneous rather than scheduled. Break your own patterns deliberately. In the words of writer Anais Nin, maintaining desire means embracing the unpredictable. Routine is the enemy of desire, and desire requires the periodic resurrection of uncertainty. Save this video so you can return to it when you need reminders about desire and trust dynamics in mature relationships. Understanding these patterns helps you respond to underlying needs rather than surface details. By now, you understand the 4 fantasies women carry quietly. None of them mean she wants to leave you or that you failed her. They're simply reflections of her inner world, places her mind goes when life feels predictable and she needs emotional release. A woman doesn't need to act on her fantasies for them to matter. They're how her mind expresses deeper needs: novelty, being desired, surrendering control, feeling alive again. When you see them this way, you stop treating her fantasy life as a threat and start recognizing it as guidance. She's showing you, indirectly, what experiences touch her emotionally. The question for any man over 60 isn't whether she fantasizes, she does. The real question is whether your relationship offers enough variety, desire, and emotional safety that her fantasies stay playful instead of compensating for unmet needs. When you bring novelty, express genuine desire, and allow her to step outside her everyday roles during intimacy. You give her in real life what her imagination has been trying to find. How do female desire psychology and fantasy patterns show up in your experience? Share your thoughts in the comments, because your perspective might help another man understand the woman he loves more deeply. If this conversation gave you deeper insight into women's emotional desires and unspoken needs, tap like and subscribe. I create videos for men over 60 who want intimacy built on wisdom. Explore the other videos on this channel for more guidance on love, desire, and truly understanding women at this stage of life. And I'm Vernon. Thanks for watching till now, and see you in the next video.